The Witcher, Hexer, Chapter 7, Blessings and Curses. Skiathekupata and Trilzum wouldn't meet up directly with Cyree until much later, at the end of their journey. Until then, S and Trilzum had a few things to do along the way before they would reach the beaches. At the end of their quest, there would come both blessings and curses to the land. The malevolent three certainly embodied the curse of the earth. The blessings came in waves over the land, through various trials of the people and the incredible hardships they endured. Once stopped by the strange talking fish, S was further surprised by another out of the ordinary thing. Trilzum had much power in his hands. Not only did his hands emit a powerful blast at will, enough to propel him through the far reaches beyond the stars, Trilzum could also show people things by pressing the palms of his hands to someone's eyes. Trilzum could show people what was, what is, and what could be. He could not show the future exactly, but could show possibilities, which were endless. This could be used as an even more powerful tool than seeing the exact future. The reason being was that Trilzum, with the help of whoever he chose to put his hands on, then they could help him pick the best possible outcome. The only setback was that he could not do this to himself, since he was the one emitting this type of gaseous energy along with the power of his own touch. This was impossible to do to himself, since he was immune to the very energy that was he himself. Trilzum asked Skiathekupata, "May I show you something? If you let me cover your eyes." Skiathekupata had no idea what to expect, other than the assumed thing done typically in these kinds of occurrences, when someone will have their eyes covered by someone else, usually from behind, as the person guides them by slowly pushing them along in some direction, as they let the blinded person walk themselves to wherever or whatever they are supposed to be surprised with to see. This was not what was happening this time, and Skiathekupata should have been able to guess that since Trilzum was otherworldly, that typical rules did not come into play or ever apply to this celestial being. Once Trilzum put his hands over the living creature's eyes of Skiathekupata, they became suffocated in those burrow hole sockets and tried to jump at his hands, but Trilzum emitted a strong burst of gaseous air. Soon as the living eyes that were independent creatures came forward to give a nibble on Trilzum's hands, they fell asleep in a trance-like state, eyes open, stunned. The eyes relayed images shown from Trilzum's hands directly to Skiathekupata's dormant, entranced brain. Now, what S saw was so incredible, Trilzum could only wish to see, as S spoke in incredibly detailed description, describing what was seen in this vision of a new world. Trilzum was not behind Skiathekupata, but they sat with legs crossed in front of each other, next to the creek, on some rocks, like the ones the talking fish with horned mane flopped around on. Trilzum only said, "Now close your eyes, and let me show you the world we can begin to recreate." Okay. Skiathekupata had strange eyelids that closed like an anus and tightened to a squint, while the hands of Trilzum slowly came over them. "I will not remove my hands until you are finished describing all you see. I should not be longer than what you wish." Trilzum gave the instructions that puzzled S to a point of absolute wonderment. All right. I see a light getting brighter, like the rising of the sun. This is a bronze light, and gives a warm feeling different to the atmosphere of our land here, where I've lived my life. S had checked the transmission correctly for the oncoming vision. Trilsum asked, "Since you've seen this, will you speak freely of the next things that come into your vision?" "Yes, I'm waiting. As the light at first was brighter, it is now dimming down. I think I can see something coming into sight through the fading brightness that was there." S appeared to be focusing deeply on something within the oncoming vision. "What do you see now, Skia Tekupata?" Trilsum said in slow fashion. "I see movement. All right. Now I see clearly this vision. There are beings that look like nothing I've ever seen before. I think they are our children to come. I will be able to have my own children with myself once I begin to be removed from the stress of my existence. After you and the Queen of the Sea become consumed in your marriage, and our plans come to fruition. Then as you are king, Cyria's queen, and I as your druid, we shall have many offspring to come from the intelligent minds we have been gifted with by nature. Not only this, but you shall impregnate many monsters, and by these spells I've carefully crafted by the blood from the ancient royal blood, those children shall evolve from your intellect. The old primitive monsters left on the earth will be eaten by the new evolutionary changes caused by our works soon after birth, as the new beasts eat their parents, to fulfill our destiny, sealing our fate as the purveyors of this new world, born from the old. What I see right this moment is the movement of these new breed of monsters, who are possibly more intelligent than us put together. They're well dressed and working together to do such incredible work. I need to focus on looking around this place to describe what is being done." S stopped its mouth by tightening the scarf around the neck. "Please, I know it's difficult not to express your thoughts or feelings about what you're learning from seeing, but if you do this, you will miss things you are seeing. Please, if you can, try to only describe in detail everything you see, without allowing your mind to go on expressing your analysis of the information you obtain through this most incredible learning experience, which I do understand seems impossible to not go off on a tangent about." Trilsum carefully placed his words to not discourage in any way that would risk this method into being ineffective. "I'll tell you what I see. We will inevitably die. You, I, and our queen, and your queen, Cyri, the queen of the sea, the one thought to be immortal, and even prayed to, as she is looked at as a god among the earth, as spouted off in raw emotion from the intenseness of the flowing visions, as Trilsum's fingers pressed against the tightly shut eyelids. You see this now, our death? Trilsum suspiciously questioned the validity of his claim. Yes, I saw it. We will be in darkness, and then we shall be no more amongst the living upon the earth, as professed. Now speak plainly of what you see. Let your emotions stray from powering your tongue. Trilsum guided the best he could through the impossible navigation of someone else's visions. There's so much. S then continued for some time, and couldn't stop describing the many things to be seen in the most magnificent vision ever to be experienced by a creature. Skiathekupeta described the different types of beings he saw, and the landscapes they had built, along with many things too fantastic to comprehend. First were the descriptions of the three main creatures that Skiathekupeta understood to be its own descendants of children. They looked just like itself, as did the others who were underground, yet did not have the mental capacity as compared to the one called S. With the hexical reverse curse concocted by Skiathekupeta, the cerebral design of its own brain was duplicated as closely as anything could ever be. As closely as anything could ever be. The creature Skiathekupeta began to let out a thick discharge of tears that leaked out of its closed eye sockets, while Trilzum's hands covered them. Why are you crying? Is this not beautiful and glorious to see the descendants of your children, as you had dreamed? Trilzum did not understand the concept of weeping for any reason other than in a bad light. I am crying for the overwhelming joy in my heart. These are indeed as I had dreamed. Skiathekupeta opened Trilzum's mind to a new concept. Skiathekupeta then went on to describe the children, who were obviously mixed between Trilzum and Sairi, the Queen of the Sea. They were not as massive in size as Queen Sairi, but were about twice the size of the average man, between 10 to 12 feet tall. Their skin was comprised of thick black scales like a snake, which was the perfect result of half-celestial being of star rock skin, covered in large pores, and the fish-like scales of the sea people, which was colored like the shades of mankind, only diamond-layered, like a lizard or a reptile. Their mouths and faces generally were like a mix between a snake and a sea bass, only the eyes were closed together to the bridge of their nose, while the nostrils were much further apart compared to their beady eyes. This gave an odd impression that made Skiathekupeta uncomfortable, describing to Trilzum. Sairi and Trilzum's children in Skiathekupeta's vision were seen being able to thrive both underwater and beyond the stars, which was magnificent. The civilizations Skiathekupeta explored were so fantastical it became depressive once the vision was over, because Skiathekupeta wished to be there very badly. These were only dreams of infinite possibilities, and S was seeing the things that could happen if they succeeded in capturing Sorella and keeping her to manipulate her. Although the Malevolent Three would take the infant girl away from Dooney and Princess Pavetta, they could not obtain her the way in which they had wished nor dreamed. Geralt of Rivia would prevent the worst of fates for the Earth, which was a utopian vision for the Malevolent Ones. This vision was not even what the monsters would want, and if they understood what was being planned, the mindless killer species would have teamed up to kill the Malevolent Three. Instead, some very interesting things happened along the way. Princess Pavetta was met by the maiden who followed Skiathekupeta like a dog by its side. This woman never even gave a name until when asked by Princess Pavetta. She was clothed in rags and sackcloth, like the poorest of the forest. This was a common saying in those times, the poorest of the forest, and the bard had written songs of these kinds of women. He most often lifted in spirit with a good time every once so often, as he was the designated ladies' man of the land. This also was the legendary bard's moniker, the designated ladies' man of the land, self-proclaimed, of course. This maiden was given the character change hex that kept her like a dog until when she was near to the princess. This helped Skiathekupeta and Trilzum very much along their way until they had come close. Skiathekupeta and Trilsum hid behind some bushes near the clearing near the road for carriages to pass through to the neighboring village. Skiathekupeta, Trilsum, and the unnamed maiden traveled for almost 3 days total, and went in a long type of route to avoid people in passing. The road would have had them arrive at the place where Duny and Princess Pavetta had stopped to stay much sooner, about a day sooner, but this was not an option, unless they wanted to risk being found. Being found before their task was complete meant that they would be hunted, as they desperately wanted to meet with the Queen of the Sea before that could happen, because then they knew they would be impossible to fight against. Their wish would seem to come true, as the bewitched maiden had the infant Sorella in her grasp. No one would ever question the Queen of the Forest in her decisions, especially in her old age. She had been strong in her convictions concerning her granddaughter, not for what was best for Sorella, not for what was best for Pavetta or her husband. This was purely out of spite and driven by self-seeking motives, empowered by hexation of dark nature. Little did she know that the Queen of the Forest had called forth another higher power of ancient evil, which came from beyond the blackness of the stars. There were ones more terrifying than the monsters they knew. These beings would come for the Queen of the Forest in their appointed time, with S showing Trilsum the way back to the forest castle. Things change at the drop of a hat, so the age-old saying goes. Things would not go as planned for the Malevolent Three, so Trilsum would later change his plans after failure was realized. These things would happen once the series of chain reactions would happen during the times of the Malevolent Three. Their time was but a season for the ageless beings. To them, when compared to their long lives living as undying gods for so incredibly long, it seemed to them but a day, as long as a fly lives. Their alliance and ruling together during the lifetimes of Duny and Pavetta, the earth would have been blessed exceedingly if Princess Pavetta and Duny had lived long lives. Perhaps the earth did not deserve their excellency and brilliance of nobility, since they had to be the purest of heart in all the land. This would have been a blessing too great for the curse of the forests to ignore. To ignore, or to not ignore, was not an option for the malevolent monsters and the ancient curse that empowered their existence by hexation. The uneasiness of the presence of the hexed maiden spooked the horses in the stable outside the inn where Princess Pavetta lay with Duny for the night, with their child. She had touched the horse, one then the other, on the face with her hand, petting them in a downward stroke, starting from just below the eyes down to the nose, then lifting her hand away before touching the wetness near their puffing nostrils, as they calmed down by her witchcraft that flowed through her fingers, yet was not hers by any means. This bewitched maiden from the small long-gone village that was called Betaken had shown herself to Pavetta through their room. The princess saw the woman outside the window as she fed her newborn, admiring the view, then became distressed at this foreign woman tending to their horses. Princess Pavetta first thought this woman was drunk, then was relieved to see this maiden look her in the eye and gesture with a hand motion to come outside. Pavetta thought there was no way this woman would be trying anything to cause harm, seeing that she was feeding her baby, as the princess was wearing a crown of pearls, which signified her standing as the rightful royal heir of nobility and standing power of the forest. Pavetta did not bother Duny as he shaved his face, as so she went out the front door of their room at the inn to meet with this maiden who called for her to come out by her horse. Princess Pavetta's mother, the old queen of the forest, had these coins she used for confirmation of a welcomed guest. If anyone had one in their possession, they would only have to show the queen's coin in hand, and they would be permitted to serve the forest queen by her command to that person. If someone had these rare coins in hand, this meant that the forest queen was waiting for that coin to return to her hand, along with whichever task she had agreed with the person or persons to carry out for her. Pavetta, her lovely daughter, knew quite well, and so the princess did not mess around. She knew that her mother, in one way or another, sent this maiden for something. Pavetta first asked the maiden, "What brings you here? I see you carry the queen's coin. You must know I am Princess Pavetta." "Yes, and Sorella is the reason. I was asked to come to you to relieve you while you enjoy your travels throughout your honeymoon with your husband. I shall stay by your side and tend to the child so you don't have to. This is the request of your mother, the queen. Please don't make me go back so soon to explain to your mother that you've rejected her wishes. She'll feed me to the monsters." The maiden was very convincing in her delivery of manipulation, as she herself was being manipulated by a powerful hex. "Oh dear, tell me your name. We cannot have that. I'm actually relieved. This is the nicest gesture of my mother ever in my life. I'm trying not to cry in front of you now, mostly so as not to wake Siri. She stayed up most of the night giggling and laughing peculiarly." Princess Pavetta gave her trust, opened invulnerability by black magic of old. "Siri, that's a cute nickname for your daughter. I wish my name were so cute as to make it sound so nice. My name is Haunch. It is short for Honchivia, but I don't like my full name even more than my nickname, since it was the name as my adopted tyrant mother, the same name, who was more or less my master before she died drinking moldy wine." The maiden gave words of truth concerning her name and her actual mother to lure the princess in without question. "I see. You know my mother is drinking herself to death with strong wine. It seems that we have something in common. I'm glad you didn't ask to take my baby back to my mother. To tell you the truth, I thought this was what you were going to ask of me, as commanded by my mother. The drinking of so much wine has damaged her brain, and she has become very bitter in her loneliness." Princess Pavetta didn't know that the hidden agenda was for Haunch to take Siri and go back to her selfish mother, as the queen of the forest had become twisted by the hexation of their very own family curse, which had been manipulated into new, more powerful spells, which were reforged into something stronger due to the experience deep within the underworld, where S had learned to grow stronger in the ways most evil. Geralt of Rivia was on the trail of S and Trilzum through the deep woods, but could not reach them before the maiden Haunch had arrived at the inn, where Pavetta, Dooney, and the infant Sorella stayed. If only the horses could have withstood the witchery of S and that powerful hold which transcended into maiden Haunch, as she had become a host to the powerful hexation, then maybe little Siri wouldn't have been taken. This was Sorella's destiny, though that could not be changed. This happened in order for her to be strengthened in the hidden place within the deep forest by the tree of forgetfulness, and also would bring her to Geralt. Knowing that the fate would not be disturbed by the chosen child of surprise, Geralt knew he would find her one day, as the visions were stronger than anything Yennefer had ever had, and she met with Geralt specifically to tell him this. The only problem Geralt of Rivia saw with this, for him personally, was that he had no idea when the meeting would happen. It could be in Sorella's old age, and in these times Geralt did not know who exactly he was looking for, as the queen vehemently pushed the notion that it was a boy instead of another powerful girl in the bloodline passed down. Geralt of Rivia knew better, and he hid his true feelings so well from the queen that she did not even suspect for 1 second of doubt that Geralt thought otherwise. To her, the queen of the forest in her own mind saw herself as the crafty, cunning bitch she had always been. Her drinking of strong wine every single day and night for all of her daughter's life had caught up with her, and she was not as bright as she once was. Princess Pavetta and her husband Dooney had already been through so much. The funny thing is that love can tear your guts out from the inside, then stuff them back in with the best feelings in life. The best feelings in life. The funny thing is that love can tear your guts out from the inside, then stuff them back in with the best feelings in life. Something they talked about often in those days, early on in their marriage. So Princess Pavetta went inside her room to tell Dooney of the good blessings from her mother in the form of this maiden haunch coming as a nanny for their travels. Pavetta was so excited she had to put in an extra effort to speak quietly so as to not wake their baby, little Sorella, who they called Ciri. Pavetta said, Dooney, stop shaving. And Dooney said, What? I almost cut my throat. Ha ha! I can't stop mid-shave, my darling. Pavetta said, I'm sorry, my dear. It's just that this woman here has been sent by request of my mother as a kind gesture. She is to be our nanny on our travels. Never in my life did I ever imagine my mother would change for the better. Well, here she is. Meet the maiden Haunch. And Dooney said, Oh, you'll have to excuse me, maiden Haunch. I must clean myself to properly greet you. Dooney wiped his face, neck up, and covered his chest with the folds of his robe to be decent, being the kind gentleman he always was. Maiden Haunch said, No worries, my king. I'll relieve you now of the burden of my presence. May I cradle your child? I'd love to get to become comfortable with her. She's very sweet. I can't believe she was giggling instead of crying all night. And Dooney said, Oh, Pavetta told you. Yes, our little Ciri is our bundle of joy, truly. And I'm not simply repeating an unfounded phrase with this child. She's amazing. Absolutely amazing, I tell you. Maiden Haunch said, I can tell. I feel the good energy from her, you, and your pleasant queen. Princess Pavetta said, You know, you're the first person to refer to us in person as king and queen. This truly is the most blessed day and night. Even if I'm tired. Ha! Dooney said, I never thought I'd hear it, my queen. And Princess Pavetta said, I was thinking the same thing. This is especially wonderful to have this gift, this day of a nanny from my mother. I can't believe it, Dooney. And Dooney said, Me either, my love, me either. And Maiden Haunch said, I can't believe this either. I feel too blessed, like this is just some strange dream. For I feared just a moment ago that you might send me away to your mother, the queen. Now I am welcomed in your travels, and I cannot be happier about this. Maiden Haunch cradled their child and did an excellent job in convincing Dooney and Pavetta that she was going to do what she said. Once it was night time, and time for them all to go to sleep, S and Trilsum came together to Maiden Haunch's room, which was across from the room in which Dooney and Pavetta were staying. This was done so that the couple could enjoy themselves to the fullest without having to worry about hearing their child giggle and laugh in a room next to them conjoined. The maiden was commanded by S to not leave to the queen immediately, because they still had a ways to go before it would be able to happen. They needed to travel for 2 more days at the very least, before they would be at the beach destination and the coast where the boat waited for Princess Pavetta and Dooney. First, it was Trilsom's voice that the maiden haunch heard, but she only saw S in her room. Maiden Haunch first heard the strange whisper outside her window the very moment she noticed that little infant Siri had fallen asleep in her arms. The maiden looked up to see nothing in the window, however. There was S, in a startling pose, in the darkened room. Trilsom first whispered just outside the window, "You shall not take this child just yet." Then, as soon as Haunch realized it was not the voice of S in the room, she stared, squinting her eyes to get nothing. No detail of the creature came through the dark room. Just a silhouette, this black shadow hunched over, with the already black form of the elaborately layered druidic uniform of a cardinal druid sorcerer. The large box-shaped veil mask was rather disturbing, even in the light of day, if you weren't expecting to see such a thing, so one can imagine the terror it induced in the dead of night, let alone the terrifying sudden appearance of this in your very room, which you are supposed to sleep in for the night. Little tiny creatures that were some kind of previously unseen monsters came into the room as Trilsom's hand opened the door slowly to let them in while S got her attention, as this bewitched maiden was treated like their dog being tricked into obedience for their sole benefit. These creatures were never seen by mankind for two good reasons, not because they were otherworldly, of something of this nature, but that they were from the earth that was kept away from the eyes of man. The cosmical nature of Trilsom, who was a man from the place where the blackness cradled the stars, and passing stones of broken meteors, comets, and asteroids, called rocks from the sky, passed and exploded by him daily, as his days went on to no end. The little creatures felt the connection that Trilsom emitted from this stone-like body. The gaseous emissions from his pores called to these little creatures. They were called stalignos. Stalignos always were together and never normally moved from their homes. They rested in a family environment among forest caves in particular. There was an abundance of them in the parts that proved impossible to reach by man. Trilsom spoke to them by his species' means of communication, which came from a sort of higher intelligence. The wisdom of these rock-like creatures reciprocated the energy back and forth between Trilsom. The form of the stalignos were like icicles. They had no feet nor legs. These creatures pivoted on their round bottoms and could bend as if they had spines, which seemed impossible once considering their biological components of being. These were not exactly made of rock nor clay, but had both elements. along with fleshy elements. This was the magical part of their genetic makeup that coincided with Trilzum and allowed them to have a natural magnetic connection between each other. And so these little creatures, the tallest of them not being even a foot tall, were coming in by the bunches to make the baby Siri laugh, because naturally she had awakened by the flinched jumping of Maiden Haunch while she held the infant Siri in her arms. The whisper of Trilzum through the window had first alerted Maiden Haunch to a heightened sense of disturbance. Then, after staring at S until its shadow became unrecognizable, Siri let out a single cry. S called out the beginnings of a sleep spell, and was stopped by its own choice, once seeing the strange little creatures making their way into the room. Siri looked at these stalignos with a content smile, and then came her quiet giggles until falling back to sleep. The recitation of the beginning of the sleep spell was just enough to work along with the relaxation that came from the little creatures entering the room to entertain her. It worked in Trilzum and S's favor in the best case scenario. These seemingly harmless creatures, known as the Stalignos, were actually the strongest parasites of the old world. Their mouths were not very visible to the human eye because they were at the top of their points, which were also their heads. The Stalignos were almost like worms, but far superior, and Trilzum knew this. He also knew what they were going to do to ensure the strength on top of the hexation from S. The Stalignos burrowed their way into the skin and body of Maiden Haunch. These parasites stabbed into her like spikes, but were eventually slowly devouring her fleshy tissue. These stone-like parasites were like magnetized energy conductors, perfect to be made stronger by hexation. Trilzum and Skiatukupata were a malevolently perfect team, as they enhanced each other's abilities to control and to make death in the most cunning of ways by order of orchestration. The next chapter is chapter 8.